Hello, everyone. Sunday mic check. I hope everyone is good. While we're waiting for everyone to come on board, just want to remind everyone that our new episode's coming out on Tuesday. So look to your podcast feed for that. And also, can't remember. No, we don't have continuing the conversation this week. That was last week. So just be on the lookout for your feed this week. And then also, if you haven't, don't forget to check out Rajiv and Bonnie's new podcast, Haystacks. There's lots of information on there, including in our um, recent show notes for continuing the conversation. So you want to make sure that you check that out. As you're coming in, please feel free to say hello. This is our Sunday mic check where we're just letting the conversation take us to wherever. Sometimes it's light, sometimes it's not so light. And yeah, I hope everyone has had a good week and that you're anticipating a good week as well coming up. So please feel free. Janelle, you are back. Hello. Welcome. Welcome, welcome. You made it. Thank you so much. That, I don't know why that came up differently. You're back. I see it shows you where you came from for there. Did I switch things around? Oh yeah, things got switched around real good. Um anyway, let's switch it up. There. We'll go purple today. Kind of matches the aesthetic here. Janelle, hope you had a good week. Hope you're doing well. For everyone else, please feel free to pop in, say hi in the comments. Let us know how things are going. Um, yeah, Sarah, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Yeah, so like I was saying at the top of the show, new episodes coming out. We're going to be uh Janelle, you've even got my Rencast shirt on today, so I won't forget. That's amazing. Thank you. I'm trying to remember which shirt you got. We still need to work out that merchandise stuff. We have a lot of ideas, but time just gets away from us. We'll just wait for that multi-million-dollar donor to just let us do this full time forever. um, yeah. So speaking of merch, you can always go to our renacast.com/store, see some of the stuff that we have up there. I think we're going to be doing a revamp soon, but for now, we've got some good stuff up there. Oh, I almost forgot. I wonder if I have time to go grab it. I'll save it for next time. Um, but I played around with another merch type place. I was just messing around with not a new logo design, but just something a little like, I don't know, like modeled after what is it, that outdoor brand Patagonia or something like that? Is that what it's called? Is that how you pronounce it? But like that outdoor style, I messed around with like a little sticker that I have. So I have a bunch of those. So I think maybe what I'll do next week for Sunday mic check is that anyone who joins us, I'll just send them out. I'll show them to you next week. I don't want to run out and grab it. They're in a room in which people are sleeping right now. So yeah, Janelle, two. That's amazing. I have two, the rainbow colored logo one, and I am my Renacast. Also, a Casey bumper sticker and pen. Nice. Thank you so much. That's amazing. It's so fun. I mean, Casey belongs on, everywhere. Everyone should know about him. Um, the place that I got the stickers that I was just telling you about from, they had like a deal that I just missed out on. I didn't have time to get the logo ready, but it was like those not hologram pictures, but like the ones that have like the rainbow sparkly stuff. And I was going to adapt his clergy drag logo into that sticker, but I just didn't have a chance to take advantage of the deal. And it's too expensive to do otherwise. But maybe next time I get the notification, I'll have it ready to go. Yeah. So how is everyone else? If you were here joining us last week, I'm still working out the kinks for the messing around with the second camera. Let's see if this works. Is that good? So you see the lighting's all different, and I'm just trying to do something different. But yeah, so it's coming together a little bit better. The lighting still is a little off. You can tell the difference, but it is what it is. It's a lot of fun. I got a new light. Well, I had the light, but I got like a um, what's it called, like a diffuser or whatever. So I'm trying to mess around with the new setup, but I haven't had a lot of time to do it. So this is testing ground. It's the Irenicast testing ground / Sunday Mic Check / whatever the hell you want to talk about. So yes, it is fancy, Janelle. It's super fancy. Oh, Sarah, thank you. Yes, if you're joining us this week, the sound of the audio was back and forth, so I figured out a way to where it's just coming from this microphone for now. Um, I have a boom mic just out of range here. I don't know if I pull it in, you can see it right there, but I haven't really gotten that dialed in yet. Because I would like to not have this obstruction in here in the frame or whatever, especially if I switch back and forth. But because it's so directional, it sounds funny. Anyway, this is just behind the scenes stuff. If you're not interested, please feel free to say, "Hey, Jeff, let's talk about something else," and then throw it in the comments, and I will gladly oblige. But yes, thank you, Sarah, for noticing. Yes, the sound is coming in consistent now. But I guess because we're a podcast, it's fine if this is in the frame. It adds an air of. I've had a couple meetings for work where this is just my setup when I'm working from home. So I'll get on a Zoom call with someone that I'm either just meeting or it's the first time they've seen kind of my setup and they're like, "Ooh, professional." It's like, well, and I feel kind of, I don't know if it's self-conscious about it, but just like everyone else is in these like little webcams on their laptop and the sound is just the mic from the laptop. And here I am with these, I have earbuds in and professional mic and background and all that kind of stuff. But I'm proud of it. Worked hard on this. This is one of the few bright spots that's come out of, well, for me personally, quarantine has been able to experiment a little bit more with the video setup. So, yeah. How's everyone else doing? Good week, bad week, in the middle week? Learn anything new, read anything new, watch anything new? It has been, I mean, I guess we can say this at this point every week. Like every week has some new weird surprise. And I don't even surprise is the right word, but we're just moving along, moving along. Yeah, I mean, for those of you listening, I'm just curious. Let's take some time to get like a quick poll. I'm wondering how. I know that I've asked this before on the Sunday Mic Check, but I'm just curious on how people listen to the show. Oh, Sarah, doing okay. Dog was sprayed by a skunk a few days ago. That was fun. Oh my goodness. So for that, did you take your dog to a groomer? I've heard like I think it was even on MythBusters, but like the tomato juice, did you have to like do something separate, or do they have like a specific product for that now? Because I can't imagine. I hope the dog's okay, and then I hope also that it wasn't too much of a burden to get that going. um Janelle, my apartment, my bathroom is directly behind my desk setup, so when I zoom, I forget to shut the door, you can see into my shower. Nice. Hey, that's it adds a little bit of charm. um but I have an awesome Kraken shower curtain, so I usually go shut that. That's very nice. You got to have a nice background in the thing. Uh, I've thought about like doing the banner behind me or just like working out these shelves or whatever. I think a lot about what's behind me. Um, so so yeah, that way if you already have the shower curtain background built in, you can change that out and you don't need to worry about the artificial zoom background that goes in there. Very nice. Oh, here we go, Sarah. We bought Nature's Miracle to put it on him, a deskunking agent, and bathed him. Poor guy was sprayed in the face and wasn't happy. Oh, I can't imagine. What kind of dog do you have? Um, we've had a lot of recent discussions in our household about getting a dog because Excuse me. I When our daughters were born, we had 2 dogs, but they were very old and they died shortly after the girls were born, and, I mean, having twins, it was just like, I don't wanna add a dog to this mix, but now they're at a certain age where, they can interact with the dog, and I really miss having a dog. Really, really miss having a dog. Um Oh, Janelle, congratulations. You start a job tomorrow. Have divorce lawyer now, good thing, finally getting closure and being able to move on. Also going to mountain cabin with my dad, brother, and daughter next week. Oh, that sounds like a lot of fun. That sounds like things are going in a good direction. Congratulations on the new job and having some time with the family. That's really nice. And getting out in the mountains, also really nice. Very cool, Janelle. Super happy for you. That's awesome. Yeah, we haven't done much vacationing around here. We're working on it. We're trying to figure all that out, but man, it's just so much. Oh wow, you have 3 dogs. The greyhound got sprayed. He likes to hunt creatures in the yard and pick the wrong target, I guess so. I also have a pit boxer mix and a corgi mix. Oh, that's nice. My my wife and my wife's family really, they all just love corgis for some reason. And to be honest, I don't get the appeal. Like, I mean, it's a dog, so it's awesome. But uh, I'm at this point. Our last 2 dogs were just hairy beasts. We had a border collie Siberian husky mix and a German shepherd golden retriever mix, and I spent half the time just like vacuuming up pet hair. And it was just ridiculous. So I think this time we're looking at like a labradoodle or something so that there's not that hair thing. I know you then need to like worry about cutting and all that kind of stuff, but I'd gladly spend the whatever it is to get them groomed once or twice a month or once a month or every other month than the hours that I spent, you know, tangling dog hair out of my vacuum. And we got to a point where we just got one of those big dog brushes and had to like brush it out of the carpet. It was the only thing that worked well to get it all over the place. So, but I do miss having a dog so bad. Janelle, everyone comes to Florida for vacation. That's world hub for COVID. Yay. We get out of it. I see on that one. We're actually not at the scale of Florida, but I live in a county where we're a destination spot. Uh, and a lot of tourism drives our area because we have like a highly developed wine industry. We're like right on the coast. It's always beautiful weather. So our numbers have been steadily climbing up because people from surrounding counties are getting closed up, and we've done a fairly good job of keeping cases down, although not too recently. But then everyone like crowds into our area, and it kind of causes all of our numbers to go up, unfortunately. Sarah would highly recommend greyhounds too, if you're okay with a lazy dog. They still shed, but much, much less than husky, lab, German shepherd, etc. That's not a bad idea. I like a lazy dog, but although I don't know if that would be a pet that would enable me in my own laziness. uh, Maybe a dog that forces me to get up a little bit and move. But yeah, our border collie husky mix had so much energy. And you know how like there's smart dogs and then there's not so smart dogs. She was super smart, but it wasn't like the kind of smart where she did all these cool tricks and everyone was in awe of how smart she was. She was smart in like an evil genius kind of way. Like my sister lived with us for a while, and I think she was just jealous of having her in the house. I don't know what it was, but she would take her shoes, not both of them, just one of them. And then my sister would be looking all over the house. Where's the shoe? Where's the shoe? And then at least like 5 weeks, or not 5 weeks, but like, 7 to 10 days later, it would just show up at the front of her door all chewed up. Uh, and she could figure out how to get out of stuff. Like it was crazy. It was crazy. But our other dog was like the opposite. Super like she thought she was a little dog. She was a lap dog, but she was huge. So she'd just jump on you super snuggly, nice and lazy. I really liked that. But um it's a good thing to know about greyhounds, and they're good with kids. That's another thing. We're just kind of in that place where our girls are not super comfortable with dogs yet. So we want to make sure that they're not going to be skittish or anything like that. But yeah, I'll take all the recommendations I can get when I make a good decision when we bring a pet into the family. But yeah, we've had quite the experience with dogs, and our border collie husky we got as a puppy, so that was a whole thing. I don't know if we want to do the whole puppy thing again. And then our other dog was a rescue, and she was the sweetest thing in the world. I can't believe anyone even thought about getting rid of her, but I guess she before lived in like an apartment, so I had just this little back area and couldn't run, so was escaping a lot of times. And but she wasn't a stealth escaper. She was just a brute. Like she was just a big lumbering dog that would just force her way to wherever she wanted. And I think she had that disease or disorder where you didn't know when you were full. Because one time she got, I'm just telling my dog stories, by the way. One time she got into the dog food and we came home and the dog food was all over the floor. And like I felt like when we went over to her to try to pull her away, she wasn't having it, but I didn't want to pull too hard because like literally I felt like if I pushed too hard, she was going to pop because you could visibly see it was, she was a hungry beast. Sarah, Evil Geniuses, our boxer mix is like that too. Love her energy and intelligence, so I get it. Yes, greyhounds are good with gentle with kids. Oh, that's good to know. Generally, we tell people to teach kids to leave them be when they are laying down, respect space so that they don't startle in their sleep. Yeah. And then, of course, yes, no pulling their tail. I have a feeling our girls are pretty timid when it comes to that. So I don't think they'd take any chances, unlike if they, because our dogs were around when they were little babies, but they just kind of avoided the girls and they weren't super aggressive with them. But yeah, um, that is good to know. Greyhounds are tall though and lanky, right? I'm surprised for a dog that races. Maybe this is just a stereotype, but that they would be so chill. So that's the more you know, right? Yeah. So anyone else having some fun adventures? We got new opportunities, mishaps with dogs, all kinds of fun stuff. Ah, Shannon, welcome. Good morning. I've never had dogs. I've always had a bit of scared of them, so they do seem to complete a lot of families well. Yeah, I can understand that for sure. I feel like there's dog people, there's cat people, and then there's just people who just love all animals, and I'm sort of in between there. I'm a dog person. I've just always liked having a dog. Um, I'm not a cat person though. Like borderline, and I don't mean to offend anyone who's listening because I know there are some cat people and they are passionate and that's wonderful and that's great. But I am the opposite of that. Uh, fortune, I shouldn't say this, but fortunately, my my spouse is allergic, so we never have to worry about ever having one in the house because I know that sometimes our girls want a cat, and I'd cave immediately if they asked enough times to get a cat. But now it's a health thing, so um, yeah. But dogs can be intimidating for sure. I know when we got our second dog from the rescue, I was a little apprehensive at first because I wasn't, we didn't know this dog. It was big, it was aggressive. Um, oh, Shannon got away to Soda Springs near Donner this weekend, and it was wonderful. Fresh air, trees, quiet. That's wonderful. That's great. I'm so glad you had a good time to get away. Yeah, we're hoping to do something like that this summer. Just get away and do something. Um, but yeah, that sounds wonderful. All we've been doing here is uh every day over exceeding our screen limits and eating a lot. So, we need to get out a lot more. I'm so glad to hear everyone's having for the most part a good week. everyone get a chance. Oh, just real quick, if you can, like in the comments, like just curious. I think last time I asked this, we had a lot of people say that they just listen to the link on our Facebook for the show, but I'm just wondering how people listen to the podcast itself. And I know some of you said you only listen to a couple. I'm just trying to keep a running tally in my head so that we know how things are going, um, how people are listening, how people are engaging. Uh, uh, we find we have kind of a different segmented audience depending upon the technology. Janelle went to visit a friend for the first time recently and told him I was going to cuddle his dog. He told me the dog was not cuddly and would sniff me in uncomfortable places. Okay, I still cuddle the dog, but also got sniffed. Well, at least you were warned and you knew what you were getting into. Uh, Janelle, listen to Apple Podcast. Okay, yeah, we do have, I mean, I think it's like 70, maybe down to like 65 or 60% of all podcast listeners are on Apple devices, even though it's like 80% of the world's devices are Android. Um, I think part of that because Android doesn't have a native podcasting app, so you have to download a third party. Yeah, okay, that's interesting. Sorry, I might have missed a bit. Had to let the dog out. Oh, no worries. Shannon Facebook alerts me when you guys go live and it reminds me to click the link to go to the podcast. All right, so you're an online listener. That's great. This is the Facebook thing has been fun. Although I have my doubts and reservation as Facebook as a company, it's giving us a good tool to connect with everyone for now, and we'll see how that moves forward. We're also broadcasting this directly to YouTube Live as well. Our YouTube channel is kind of more of just like a discovery place. Like when I post our episode every week, it goes to all the podcast feeds and all that kind of stuff, but also a version of the audio just goes straight to YouTube with our cover art or whatever. And that's mostly just discovery. And then obviously all these live videos sit there as well. Sarah, yes, I got a Facebook alert this time. Okay, nice. All right. That's good to know. People are getting the alerts, letting them know that we're live. I was scheduling this on the event, like as an event every week on their page. And I wasn't sure if that was um, working or not, but it sounds like most people that are going to join us, they're getting kind of the alert or they're just seeing it live in their feed. Yeah, it's hard to keep track of. Like it's it's you see these pages, some of them that go live and they have like, you know, 25,000 followers or even 10,000 followers. And then you look at their live feed and there's only like maybe 10 or 15 people on there. And I know part of it is there's just like everything is saturated. Oh, Shannon, thank you. Yeah. Yeah, it's a YouTube channel. We don't promote it that much just because it's a little disingenuous to the platform because it's just an audio file with an image for the most part because we're just letting our episodes sit there. But it's been handy since we started doing this live streaming stuff to be able to allow it to go there as well. So we've picked up, a few listeners here and there as we kind of grow and figure out what places to be. I mean, with all of our schedules and all of us working full time, we're trying to, dedicate our time. Really, we've, decided we're going to dedicate our time to putting effort into Facebook because that's where we find the most engagement for right now. So everything else is just kind of bonus, like our Instagram feed. Pretty much, it just sits where all of our individual episode artwork goes. Twitter is the same thing; it just announces when an episode is out. So they're more like news feed stuff, and the YouTube stuff. So some of our audio sitting in there. I didn't realize how many people just listen to audio. We have some episodes that have like hundreds of listens, and it's like, oh wow. But I'm not. Again, I haven't delved into that, so I'm not sure how they, you know, judge that or what considers a view, how long you have to watch before it's a view or anything like that. But yeah. Janelle, for once, I'm actually behind on Irenicast, but caught up on my friend's wrestling podcast, even though I don't care about wrestling. Same friend with the dog with no boundaries. That's so great that you support your friend like that, even though it's a subject that you're not necessarily all that into. So I'm for it. If you're gonna skip Irenicast, there's no better reason than because you're supporting a friend's creative endeavor. So I'm 100% down with that. Although you don't need my permission for that. And I still need to check out that podcast. Have it written down. I need to listen to it. I don't even watch wrestling that much anymore, but I do keep up on the podcast just because I'm curious. For those other that are listening, please don't judge me. Everyone has a guilty pleasure, something they're a little embarrassed about liking. it's so it's so hard to get a read on how this whole thing is going because there's a delay. So I think like you're hearing what I'm actually saying, like maybe 5 to 10 seconds after I say it. Um, and then, I'm just used to facial cues. Like if I'm saying something, if it's landing, should I change subjects? And my default is always to talk about the nerdy crap in the background that I'm doing with the show and the video and all that kind of stuff. So please, no one's being rude by telling me to change the subject. I promise. Janelle got a mention on his latest podcast episode too. Nice, very nice. Because he told me about Orange Cassidy, and I told my kid, and we tried to watch Fighter Fest. Very nice. I didn't get around to watching that one. Now there's so many different promotions that it's hard to keep up. But I did listen to a recap on a podcast, so there you go. Yeah. Yeah, so just trying to figure this whole thing out. It's cool that you all join us on Sundays. Appreciate it. Um, just as a quick side note for those of you that are still sticking around, um, I'll keep doing this through July. August might be a little iffy in terms of how consistent Sunday mic check is. Some things might be changing, so it may turn into a different day mic check. I don't know. So welcome your input if this is something you'd like to do. Uh, I've really been wanting to sit down and kind of have a little bit more purpose to this time instead of free form. Maybe that's just a cover for how awkward it is for me just sitting here throwing stuff out there. So yeah, I don't know. Still haven't watched it either. My cable company won't let me because I don't have a TNT subscription. Yeah, yeah, it's interesting that TNT has a long history of wrestling program since its inception as a cable system, and this is kind of a interesting thing. I think I have it available on YouTube TV. I got someone's password for that, uh, but I honestly I haven't watched it. I think I watched the premiere of it because I was curious. Like anytime a new potential competition for the WWE shows up, I'm always curious to see the first show. There was a topic in the early days of Mic Check that worked well. Yeah, it worked well. It's just been different being the only person. Like it was miss having Rajiv on board, or even Alan when he was able to pop on from now on, just to kind of have that back and forth. Um, but yeah, that would be a good idea. I've been thinking about like a loose format for this, but I also want to keep it flexible enough that we can change directions based on uh based on whoever's watching, comments, all that kind of stuff, and make it interactive. So it's just one of those things. Um and then just announcing it ahead of time. Um we're gonna have an email list soon so that we can get everyone more immediate information. Because if we announce something on the show, like, I mean, Janelle, you're one of our more dedicated listeners, which we're super appreciative about. But even our dedicated listeners are going to fall behind in the audio, which is totally understandable. The podcast that I love the most, I sometimes am a couple weeks behind, um, based on life. So if we make an announcement on the show that's timely, sometimes that doesn't always work, especially since we're only putting up stuff twice a month. Well, I guess almost weekly now, that with the continuing the conversation. But even then, I don't know how people feel about having the audio of that. And we may just, I don't know. Um, but and then social media, you're at the whim of everyone's algorithm. So we want to put something out there and people might see it. Maybe even a good majority might see it. But we also have a lot of people that just go straight to our website and check when our news site thing is and listen to it that way, or they're just listening on their podcast platform and they're not interacting with us at all on any of the social media platforms. So I think we are going to start um, an email list so that we can have something like direct, like here's when new merch is available, or here's when a new episode is available, or here's a new project that we're working on. Because we really haven't had a chance to get in front of you all and kind of like lay out um, the broader purpose for our work. So like the podcast is just the tip of the iceberg of some of the stuff that we are currently working on, and we want an opportunity to put that out there. So be on the lookout for an email list, and I'm sure there'll be some sort of incentive to sign on once we get it. Um, yeah, I miss Rajiv, having Rajiv on here. So, and I think I'm the only one here right now. I think you are, Janelle. It looks like I have one person here. Uh, Renegades fangirl in the house. Well, it is. It really is, Janelle. It's very appreciated. Um, it's very, it's very humbling to have our work appreciated, and the feedback is always helpful. So we really appreciate it. The last woman standing right now, I guess. I'm looking, yeah, it looks like you're the only one in the chat. But, I personally, I don't watch a lot of Facebook Lives myself. So I get it. And even just the interaction that we've had is totally worth it. I mean, usually at this time in my household, I'm the only one up. So it gives me a chance something to do. And I've been thinking about doing something on Sundays for a long time. So I'm having fun. I get to talk about random crap, play around with my new technology, all this stuff, and talk to people who love our show. How does it get better than this? Church. What's that? Yeah, so I'll take these interludes to just remind everyone that we do have a new episode coming up. We're going to be talking about white supremacy in progressive Christianity. That'll be the episode that'll be in the feed on Tuesday. It's a good conversation. Um, Janelle, I watched one last night. Oh, you're talking about a Facebook Live that my social justice organization was hosting. Yeah, I've caught a couple of them. Part of it, I'm just not on Facebook that often. Like honestly, it's my excuse me, it's my least. I used to really like it, like just scrolling on Facebook and seeing how people are doing. Oh, hey Sarah, welcome on YouTube. You're watching from YouTube. Sorry, using data because my internet went out. This is Sarah again. Well, welcome. Welcome back. Coming at us live via YouTube. I haven't really checked out the YouTube interface, so uh I need to do that. I need to do a test there and check that out. Um seeing one of my good friends moderate candidate forum was fun. Yeah, I mean, that's what's mostly gonna drive me to most of the Facebook Live stuff that I watch is just, um, you know, someone I know or wanna support. Although whenever it used to happen a lot more often, but it doesn't happen very often lately. But, Alton Brown used to jump on Facebook Live a lot and answer questions, and I always I always enjoyed that. It was fun watching some cooking stuff. Uh, there's always some good stuff out there. On YouTube, I watch one of my favorite chefs owns a restaurant up in Northern California. It was one of the founders, I think, of a website called Serious Eats, and um, he has his own YouTube channel, Kenji Lopez Alt, and he just straps a GoPro to his head and cooks and talks about what he's doing and all that kind of stuff, and I just love it. I eat up every minute of it. Um, Sarah, no worries. The internet went out. Back now. Have you ever heard of the Color of Compromise video series? It was recommended to me to show at church. We had an interesting thing happen. Story coming. Give me one moment. Oh, no, I have not heard of that. And I'm super interested in the story. So, huh. I'm gonna write that down in case I forget. I could always come back to the video feed, but it's just easier. Color of Compromise. I'm intrigued already. Janelle, candidate forum was for the town I went to high school in. It's really good. They didn't ask me to actually do any work for it because I was just triggered by the terrible education system and the candidates and sending my hosting friend running commentary in the messenger the whole time. uh, Good news. They will never ask me to moderate candidate forum now. Uh, I mean, that is good news, especially if you didn't want to do it. Uh, yeah, I mean, don't get me started on the education system and what that's going to look like over the next couple years. Although, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if this is a good perspective to have, but to me, school's more social education than anything else. Like, I don't know. I went to school. I learned a lot, but I also learned that it's a system. It can be gamed, and I felt like, I'm much more worried about our kids developing empathy and uh, being socialized and getting out there than I am whatever education, especially now. Like we can learn stuff. And I mean, I went to community college. It was cheaper. I didn't need to spend all that money the 4 year and then just transfer that way. It seems to me that unless you're gonna like trying to be in some higher up echelon of whatever, that they have good teachers and good friends and they become functioning adults, then I guess that's all. It's all we can ask in the end. Um, but yeah, I mean, the school system. Me about the school. Yeah, I mean, politics, it's one or the other, unfortunately. All right, Sarah. Looks like it's story time. I'm excited. Oh, there was an abuse of the church system, email system. A member who doesn't come to church a lot lately sending a baiting email saying that America is not a racist country. It's hard not to respond, even though it into less of a conversation from him, more of an outpouring of racist misgivings. Multiple people within the church responded in a constructive way with their own experiences perceiving racism in our country. Now I've been looking for resources to help guide us into healthy. That's interesting. Huh. So like the email system, I'm wondering like someone like got control of whoever like the church email list, or does your church send out just like a bulk email where there's a bunch of people on like the CC list and you can reply to all? Because um that could be messy for sure. Huh. Yeah, that's a bummer, man. Churches, man. I'm curious. If you don't have to, obviously, this is a public forum, but I'm curious of uh, you know, what kind of church you go to, denomination, or um, relative size of your community. I mean, I'm reading into things, but I'm guessing you live in a smaller area because you're talking about a lot of outdoors with your dogs and all that kind of stuff. But again, I could be wrong. Um, Healthy way of talking about this stuff. Our email system isn't privated. It's a bulk email. So we replied all to a short prayer from our pastor about racism. Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's tough. Because then how do you address that? Because I mean, I would assume, and then I'm assuming, again, if I'm making too many assumptions, please feel free to correct me. But I'm assuming you're not meeting in person or it's very limited. So to address that in any kind of like forum for people is probably really difficult right now too. Um, wow. And I mean, just the email system to be able to reply all to that is there's a time and place, I guess. So I'm sorry y'all had to go through that, but I mean, some of the times that's good. Stuff like that needs to happen in order for there to be real conversation outside of just sending an email and knowing that there's other stuff that need to be addressed and talked about and worked through as a community. Um, so I hope that. Okay, so Sarah, you are at a congregational UCC church in a rural community. Hit the nail on the head. 20 members going per service. That's exactly what I'm looking to see. How can we address this? We're doing in-person gatherings, socially distanced in a large field and on church property. Okay, so you are gathering together. That's a tough part. I mean, and Sarah, please take any advice or anything I say with a grain of salt, because you know your community and your people better, and you know whatever your church leadership looks like. But in that situation, I think with the benefit there is you're within a smaller community, so individuals can be addressed um, more lovingly, where they don't feel like they're being put like through this administrative red tape. But at the same time, have it some sort of administration base to know like how to work through that, and even just um, shoring up the email policy to make sure that it's just something that goes out, so not everyone can see who's on the email list. But I mean, that's obviously aside the point. But um, it sounds like it's just an opportunity to shift directions, and whether that's the primary way through a sermon series or a primary way through some sort of online class to begin to a book club to start conversations and kind of address some of the specific things or myths about racism that people have. I mean, you can always check out our anti-racism list if you wanted to start a book club or anything like that. Again, that list that we have on the website at irenicast.com/anti-racist is just a curated list from things that us as hosts have actually read and have helped us personally. It's not like a comprehensive list. There's plenty of others out there. In fact, on on the list of our list, there is a comprehensive list. But yeah, I mean, those conflicts in churches are really difficult, and I think that it takes a lot of compassion and empathy, specifically from leadership, to leave space for people to be upset, but also show empathy and try to like talk someone through a particular issue outside of whatever they're hearing or whatever their source is. A lot of questions asked in one-on-one or small group settings. There's a lot to unpack there. um, yeah, that's really difficult. um, Janelle, just going back to what you were talking about, the Florida education system is 48 or 49. I'm assuming that's out of all the states. Yeah, in the country I live in currently, one is one of the worst. I'm so jaded now that I'm doing anti-racist work. In our county, 70% of Black children are far below reading level for their grade. And now that I work on fixing systems, I know all the corruption and just how not progressive our so-called progressive county is. Yeah, I feel you there. It's similar around here. And our police and sheriff departments are even worse. Our famous celebrity cop turned out to be a racist who had assaulted a Black minor he was arresting, and the police department covered it up. and PR'd him and made him the friend of Black Gainesville. That's tough too. Yeah. There's some days where you're just like, is this ever going to change? I mean, we were having a conversation, my wife and I, this week, and we were talking about something that was done by a politician. And, my wife asked a question that I've asked several times. Can they even do that? And I just said, does that question even have relevance anymore? Because it doesn't seem like it matters, right? Like what people are supposed to or can do, it doesn't matter because they just do it, and it seems to be allowed to spread. Um, Sarah, we're hoping it can be a learning experience. Our pastor is very clear on what's going on in America lately and on systemic racism. Talking openly about it, but he said, excuse me, he said he was glad more of us replied, as he had to bite his tongue in his own reply. Well, that's good. I'm glad that you have a leader there at the church that is mindful of how delicate those situations can be. And I think you're right. I think that that's all you can hope for in those situations, is that they are learning opportunities, and then it's an opportunity not just for learning but for connection. I feel like when you're able to walk through something with someone, a conflict of any kind, if you can get through the other side, then it's a good thing. And to be clear, that's with conflict. There are certain times where reconciliation is unhealthy, but in this particular case, it sounds like it's an opportunity to educate, opportunity to grow closer, opportunity to be even more an advocate for justice and racism, or advocate against racism. Let me be clear. Janelle, I rage painted and did a political cartoon to cope with the cop thing. Guy was a personal hero of mine. Oh, I'm so sorry. And friends of mine had their family threatened for posting the dash cam video of his assault. I'm so sorry to hear that. And Sarah, I very much appreciate the ongoing conversation about racism in progressive circles, by the way. Small rural churches are, I think, more openly racist in their leanings. The UCC had a recent video addressing issues in small rural churches. Yeah. I mean, it's I think anytime you're in a small isolated area, it's easier to get insulated and be in a bubble, which is, in those instances, it becomes more important to read, to, listen to other people's voices, to recognize that there's more stuff going out of that particular circle. Like where I live in particular, I wouldn't call it rural. I wouldn't call it like too out of the way. It's still fairly well populated, but it is in between the two like big, large areas of California. So like we're like pretty much smack dab in the middle of Los Angeles area and the San Francisco area, like right on the coast. And it's a small area, but it's pretty insulated. In terms of, we were working as youth ministers in one part of the county for a while, and we had students that were a 20-minute drive from the ocean that had never been to the beach, because they were in that community. It's very strange, because we had come from the LA area, so we were used to a larger area. And I think that these conversations are much more important in those rural areas, because you have to see beyond just the everyday life, because it's wonderful, it's peaceful, it's great to be in those areas, but it's also, everything has its double-edged sword. And I think it's just a matter of making personal choices to compensate any way we can. So Sarah, I'm glad the conversation is happening, and it sounds like the church is lucky to have you in there as just a thoughtful person to be aware of the whole situation. So I hope that conversation continues to go well, and it certainly sounds like your pastor has a delicate approach too. So I hope that continues to move forward in the right direction for sure. I hope that for all of our churches, all of the conversations we're having right now, there's going to be there's going to be a lot to reckon with after all this stuff that's in front of us is done. I mean, with COVID and with police brutality and our political system, this there's a huge light being shined on our system, and it doesn't seem like many of our leaders are taking this opportunity to reevaluate, but doubling down instead. And yeah, you asked me 1 hour to the next if I have hope for the future. That answer is evolving by the hour for sure. Wow, yeah, some deep stuff. Sarah, we're becoming like a UCC podcast. I feel like I think that also has to do with the fact that you know 4/5 of us are UCC ministers right now. So yeah, wow. Thank you both for sharing. I really appreciate that. Um, it's really cool to have these conversations, um, and just be able to get to know those of you that are our listeners and how things are going with you. I hope that the content that we're providing you all is helpful, at least for just some resources or just an escape or just informative. I know that every single one of our co-hosts, I mean Rajiv, Bonnie, Casey, Alan, they're some of the smartest, loving people I know, and it's great to be able to have conversations with them on a regular basis. So I hope that that translates to all of you and that you're encouraged by them as well. Um, Sarah, I really enjoy being in a UCC church. That's wonderful. When we're able to attend around here, we do attend a UCC church since I left my last church position, and the pastor there he's just wonderful. So yeah, I definitely appreciate the UCC denomination, despite just the general objections that I have with denominations. But you know, I've only met good people in the UCC so far, so fingers crossed. I'm glad you love your community. That's wonderful. And I think that also makes conflict like this easier to kind of walk through because you have um you have something good, something special. Janelle, here's checking out of church right now, possibly forever. But I do love UCC. I have a few Florida UCC friends from my soon to be ex father in law's church and have been super supportive of my journey. That's wonderful to hear. And thank you, Janelle. And you all have been too. That's wonderful. But yeah, no, I get the church thing. Like, um, sometimes you need a break. Sometimes it's just to realize it's not for you. Uh, I'm I'm there. I get that for sure. And after being in churches myself for as a career, um, as I wouldn't say clergy, but as a director or whatever church I was at wanted to call me, being on the inside of that and then not having to do it, it's kind of there's something refreshing about that. Um, and it's I think sometimes we just need a season away, or we realize that that's not the way that works for us to interact with our spirituality, with our community. Um, and I'm very curious to see, like I'm fascinated by church, by the way. Like I feel like I'm a student of church. I'm very curious about how people conduct their worship services, like the administration and the working behind the scenes, like why people go to church, what everything's going. And I think that now that churches that never would have gone viral or gone virtual, um, that have had to because of COVID, and now they're seeing the benefits of that, particularly with some of their shut-in people or people where it's really difficult for them to go and they feel like they're missing out. And now that they don't have to, I'm really curious to see how the church landscape is going to change over the next, because I think this will have ripple effects for a decade at least, with how churches are going to organize their services. And once things get back to normal, are they really going to go back to normal, or is it going to be more of a hybrid of things? And then what does that do for people's spirituality and the reasons that they go to church? Uh, I'm very fascinated and curious to see how all this is going to play out. Um, and how many people are just going to straight up leave because they haven't had to have the responsibility. I think I was talking about this with all of the co-hosts when we were meeting a couple months ago, and just talking about like how many people are just going to like just slowly bow out because they were going because they had responsibilities, like they had to teach a Sunday school class, or they agreed to be a part of this ministry or this committee or whatever, and none of those things are happening in a lot of places. What does that do? um and I hope that it causes a reevaluation, but my experience with church, depending upon the leadership, reevaluation is not in their purview. But you never know. um Janelle, UCC in Gainesville isn't really a church. It's more like a liberal politic club. They even took Christ out of the name. It's just United Church of Gainesville. It's closest to Unitarian, although we have a pretty active actual Unitarian church. That's interesting. I've noticed that in a lot of progressive churches. And, spoiler alert for our episode that's coming up, where we talk about racism specifically within progressive or mainline churches. We talk a little bit about that. How you mentioned that they took the Christ out of the name. We talk a little bit about the differences between evangelicalism and a lot of mainline churches is I guess, for lack of a better term, the soul issue. Um, and it's really some interesting stuff in there. And, all the episodes of Irenicast are like my kids, so it's hard to pick a favorite, but I certainly was left with this one that's coming up like, oh, there's more to explore here. Excuse me. Sarah, would be an interesting episode, the evolving church, or how COVID has affected churches. A lot of people are shifting to video services. Some will probably continue them, even when it's safe to meet in buildings again. I do think reevaluation is necessary. It's been for a while now. I agree. And I think it's unfortunate that it takes these catastrophic events to cause us to reevaluate. But, I guess that's the way it goes. Yeah. We are thinking about doing an episode. And we've talked about that actually. And then I'm thinking that might be something that comes up. I thought about doing like an interview type thing where I'll just interview the rest of the co-hosts, since they're all pastors and they're coming from different backgrounds and they have different approaches to how they do church, and just pick their brain for an hour and a half on an episode and see how that works. Or maybe we make that like a live special or whatever. But I think it's a conversation that we're going to be having a lot, is that what does church look like? In the history of our show, we've had some interviews with people about church. So we've had an interview with someone who's starting like a church in a pub, so we called a beer church. There's different models that people are using, or that we're using before all this. And I think that there's a lot of different ways to do it, but it's just a matter of thinking outside of the box and being creative. And unfortunately, things have to force us to do that instead of it just being something that we do on a regular basis. So yeah, 100%. Janelle, growing up female in the Baptist church was hard, and then coming out as bi pan in the Methodist church. My Methodist church was fairly awesome, but the denomination had still been super oppressive with the LGBT plus community, so I can't stay. Yeah, I was in the UMC before. That was the last church I was at, and yeah, it's I get that. My church and pastors were mostly personally affirming to me, but the church as a whole was welcoming because they were not ready to be affirming. Yeah, when I first got to um the I was at a UMC church before. It was, you know, my last position as someone who worked at a church. And when I got there, all I had on my resume was uh youth pastor jobs from the Assemblies of God. And that was the pastor that hired me. It was the first question he asked before they even moved forward with any of it. You see a lot of this evangelical experience, and he was like, I just want to let you know, like, here's our mission statement. We're an open, affirming church. Is that a problem with you? And it wasn't, obviously. um but then as soon as I got there, part of my job was I was my official director of discipleship. So part of my job was doing adult classes and uh, uh, leadership training, helping develop a small group system, all that kind of stuff. And one of the processes that we went through as a church was to be official reconciling congregation through the reconciling ministries. And I was involved in a lot of meetings, and people, a lot of the sentiment was, well, why can't we just say we welcome everyone? And I remember, I was still new there, but I wasn't going to shut up. And I said, well, you know what? I came from very conservative background, and just because you say you're welcoming all, it doesn't mean that you all are. In fact, saying all are welcome is more deceptive than anything else. Like, if you are going to welcome a certain group of people into your church and be open and affirming and completely inclusive, then you need to be explicit about that, because of how much that community has experienced being given a bait and switch, which is why I love the work that Church Clarity does. If you haven't checked out Church Clarity, do that. They're a wonderful organization that rates churches and lets you know how inclusive they actually are, because there's a lot of ambiguity when it comes to that, unfortunately, and a lot of people get hurt by that. So, yeah. So it's, especially in the UMC, I found with my short time there, that they're of two minds too many times, and they need to just take a stand and be who they're going to be. Um, Sarah, speaking to Janelle, yes, I think a lot of churches will say they're welcoming but refuse to be affirming. Yep, exactly. That'd be our church too. It's going to be an uphill battle. They don't really get that there's a huge difference. There is a massive difference. But exactly what you said is true. Once church wasn't taking up 30% of my time, it became clear I was going because of duty and to see my friends. And out of church, I found deeper, more authentic friendships, even with a few of the people I used to go to church with. Yeah, it's funny how oh, Barbara, thank you so much. I've been listening, forgot to check in. No worries. Interesting discussion. Thank you for joining us. Um, yeah, it's interesting how we structure church sometimes to not be a place where you feel like you can totally, you know, cultivate deep relationships, because it's so programmatic sometimes, and you move from one thing to the other, and this is for this purpose. And yeah. And yeah, I have so many thoughts on this church thing. I could talk about it for a long time. Um, but that was just me always pushing up against that idea. Like, what can we do? Why can't it be different? Why can't it be this? And part of that, I think, comes out of my time as a youth pastor, is that I had a lot of freedom to just do church and services different, because I could, because no one cared. We were up in our little youth room doing whatever. So, you know, we I change things up all the time. Just like, what if we did this? Why couldn't we do this? And in fact, looking back on my time as youth ministry, one of the consistent things that we always did was, after every youth service, we always went out to eat to whatever, we rotated amongst the local fast food joints near the church. And um, those are the times I remember the most. The conversations we had, the fun that we had, the places we got kicked out of, like, it, so much more impactful than anything we could have done in that church service. And that's why I try to model our time in church off of our time, our social time in those settings, because I felt like that's where um, that's where the impact was. That's where your relationships were going to build. Janelle, I tried to make us reconciling, or at least my class was on board. And when I listened to the episode where you interviewed your friends, I was like, yes, this is why I'm here to do this. But I only had like 5 other people that wanted to be reconciling too. And it was a large church, like 2,000. So 5 people was not going to cut it. Yep, that's a tough thing, especially in a church that big. My first church was a church the size of roughly that size. And trying to make meaningful change in that large of a setting is really, really difficult. But good on you for trying and moving in that direction, because it is important. But it feels like in that size, people are more interested in, and again, these are general statements. I understand that there's always exceptions to that rule, but there's much more of a tendency the larger the church. Well, I guess maybe not even necessarily the larger the church, but there's just a tendency to keep the status quo. With all the talk, all the talk about wanting to bring people into the church and all that kind of stuff, it is, when you get down to it, a lot of times it's well, we want people to come, but we're only willing to take these many steps out of what we do. Yeah, that's tough. Yeah, church is a weird beast, man. When my marriage fell apart, I realized just how oppressed I'd been by by religion, and how my entire marriage was built on shared religious activities and interests. So once I started to unpack and deconstruct those oppressive beliefs, my marriage went down too. I'm sorry to hear that. And now that I'm out of that marriage, actually know who I am, I don't see church as a place for me. There's just too much related trauma for me. I totally understand. I mean, not completely, but uh, I get that sentiment, and I've seen it a lot. So the good thing is that you can do that, right? Like you know yourself better, you know where you're going, and you have the freedom to make those decisions and know when something's not for you, and to be fine with that. I think the hardest part for me in some of those instances was letting go of that guilt I was raised with, of you have to go to church all the time. And one that I perpetuated because my livelihood was based off of that. And it was always personal too, because as a pastor, I was like, well, no one's coming. Is it me? And all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot to let go with that church socialization. But I'm super glad to hear that you feel you're knowing yourself better and moving forward. And it sounds like you're taking good steps and strides in the right direction. So that's really good to hear. I'm glad to hear that. Sarah, I think in churches now, we miss the chance to actually apply the gospel as part of our ministry. It becomes a Sunday only thing. People see that and leave it. It isn't part of their daily lives. So there's a disconnect. If we can truly be communities, it's not just a Sunday thing. Right? Yeah. And then just a reevaluating what community is and how that works. And I think one thing too that's difficult is that, and this is just one aspect of many, but there's certain churches that we've deemed are doing it right. So there's a lot of like, excuse me, there's a lot of cut and paste models. Well, they did it like this, let's do that here. And I wish more churches had a real solid grasp of who they are as a church community and who their surrounding community is, the town or area that they live in, and recognizing how they can be a part of it. And that just because you are a close community doesn't mean you have to be an island within your greater community. Is that those things can interact and intermingle. Jeanette, oh yeah, still getting some judgment from a lot of family. unfortunately, I get that. Uh, Not Barbara Davis Wright, because she's amazing. That's wonderful. But my dad, oldest brother, and the co-parent. I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah, that's tough when the family is still entrenched in that. So hopefully you see strides in that area, and then hopefully in times where you need it, you have the strength to just make the boundaries you need to if it gets to that. But yeah, and Sarah, going back to what you were saying, the whole like Sunday only thing, it's easy to get caught up in Sunday being the only thing. I think a Sunday gathering is important and can be, but I also don't think it has to be static, or the central focus. Again, if you're going to be a part of the church. Jeez. So yes, letting go of that guilt and sense of church is what I'm supposed to do. It's hard. It is hard. It's really hard. I don't know about the rest of you, but I still have moments where I'm like, they're fewer and far between, but they're still there. Those like, am I going to hell? Like that stuff lingers. So yeah, yeah. What a world we live in. I mean, I guess all we can do is hope that whatever circumstance happens, whether it's huge pandemic and racial inequality that we're seeing now, hope that those things change in the future. Yeah, I don't know. I'm glad to hear that there are such thoughtful people like you all in these churches, in places that I don't even know about, that are a part of, thinking these things through, or have been part of the churches to try to push them. And, whether you're there for a little bit and gone, giving that church the opportunity to make the right decision, while at the same time doing what's right for you. So, yeah, I don't actually believe in hell, but I'm still kind of worried about it. Spot is tricky. It absolutely is. And then Sarah, I grew up Catholic. Hellfire is always in the back of my mind. They call it Catholic guilt. Yeah, I don't know if we have an official term for it with evangelical circles, or well, I come from a charismatic circle, so there's more than just hell. There's demons on earth that you got to contend with as as well. There, I read this book. I think I maybe mentioned it in an episode a long time ago, but I read this book in my teenage years that talked about demon possession and exorcisms and all that kind of stuff. And in it talked about how yawning was a sign of, demons being exported from the body. And every time I would sing songs, I would yawn a lot, like worship songs. But later realized it's the only time I'm really singing, and I just don't have like breath control. So I don't know what was causing me, but I would yawn, and I was literally freaked out that I was demon possessed, and that if I if I went to like the altar on so there was this period of time where I avoided like going to the altar on at a youth service or a Sunday morning to pray or whatever, because I thought, oh no, like what if they manifest and I'm exercised in front of the whole the whole congregation. Man, that was a season of quite the mind f right there. um yeah. Sarah, The Exorcist and similar movies seem to have distanced the Catholic churches from talking about demons quite as much. Right. Yeah, well, in my upbringing in charismatic circles, it was the best thing to talk about. And I was fascinated by it, especially as someone early on that was really into horror movies and stuff. Uh, I was very curious about people in my congregation who say they had seen demons, and then me myself perpetuating those stories at youth camps to freak people out before they went to bed. Yeah, it was. There's this movie that I watched in youth group. I think it was called like Invisible Enemies or something like that. I don't remember what it was called, but it was about this kid who found these glasses that gave him a window into the spiritual world. So he'd put these glasses on and you'd see that there were demons and stuff. And it was, oh man, like it was borderline considered documentary by some people. um, Janelle, I've been exploring paganism because I've always connected to divine in nature. I have tarot cards now. My dad actually warned me I'm going to summon demons if I don't get rid of them. He's charismatic. Oh yeah. Uh when I was growing up, tarot cards, yoga, like it was a big thing, like that demons could attach themselves to objects. So there was even in some people would talk to me about, being careful about what you get at garage sales and it, yeah. And I think that that's part of the reason why I've kind of gone the other way and I'm more of what I guess you would consider a materialist, where I believe there's just a physical explanation for everything if you boil it down, even if we don't know it. Um, and so I'm less quote unquote spiritual. I think maybe you can tell that from some of the conversations we have on the show. Uh, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. Um, my dad claims to see demons and ghosts and feel the presence of evil. Yep, I've had that, perpetuated that at times. Um, Sarah, while I can never tell anyone that their experience is or isn't when it comes to faith, this short thing has always made me squirm and keep my thoughts to myself. This sort of thing. Sorry. Yeah, no, I get you. And that's 100% right, Sarah. Like people's experience are their experience, and they're gonna interpret it how they want to. And I wouldn't. I mean, I guess I swing back and forth at extremes. I would never say that something doesn't exist or that something is silly, but I know that for me, the language to describe certain experiences I don't use anymore. Um, and you know, uh, I think that anything that we believe can be taken too far if we hold it so tightly that it blinds us from seeing any other point of view. So, yeah, I mean, I I agree. Also, literally the same conversation. He accused me of risking summoning demons. He asked me to interpret one of his dreams. Um, to me, both are about symbolism that gives clarity. So the irony is amusing, right? Um, Dreams were a big thing too. Um, yeah, I've been interpreting his dreams since I was a teenager because I'm an artist and poet. So seriously, symbolism, right? Yeah. I mean, dreams are an interesting thing, right? Like that was a dream interpretation was a big thing too. Um, in my experience of charismatic Christian circles, having people speak prophecy over you. I had a friend who uh, was a youth pastor, and he was very, I don't know, he dressed alternatively, like he a huge fan of punk and metal, and he's a great guy. He's like one of the best guys I know, and but he had a certain look to him, and he talked about this time he went to this like prophecy thing, and uh because of the way he dressed, he was always given a prophecy of how God would deliver him, and and it's moments like those where you're like, just because this person might be abusing these terms or this whatever doesn't necessarily mean that it's not true and that there's not something to the greater mystical or spiritual experience. I mean, you could make an argument that mystics saved Christianity from dissolving into nothing. So I get it. It's just not my language for Christianity. You have a gift. Me, I just understand symbolism. Well, for some people that is quite the gift, because there are clearly people that do not understand symbolism or know how to read between the lines of anything. So, Janelle, take that compliment. It is a gift. It is a wonderful gift. Um, Sarah, dreams I take pretty seriously, but also with a grain of salt. As a psych major, I see a lot of it as musings of our subconscious, but I have had a dream where God made an appearance once, so I get it for sure. See, this conversation, I wish Alan was on here because when I first met Alan, he was very much a Baptist and in Baptist circles, and I was in charismatic circles. We had a lot of conversations early on, and I would say that pretty shortly after I met Alan, and we had so many different conversations, he became much more of a mystic or a charismatic than I ever was, and he probably is right now. So I really enjoy having these conversations with Alan too, because he really uh, he's one of the few people I know that he just has this broad intelligence and also this uh I don't know if his senses are right, but just the spirituality about him. So he always has really great insights about these things, and he talks about dreams a lot and stuff like that. And uh, sometimes I'll roll my eyes, and sometimes I'll be like dismissive, but that's just me. I still appreciate that perspective for sure. Um, but yeah, my wife was a psych major, and we talk about dreams all the time and the symbolism of them and all that kind of stuff. And when everyone, when anyone ever asks her if like about their dream, her first question is always, "How did you feel during that?" And that was, I don't know, I just love listening to that. Janelle, prophecy was completely taboo in the Baptist church. So when my UMC survey had prophecy as my top spiritual gift, I freaked. Yeah, you know what? I'm still not clear on what the gift of prophecy is. I know sometimes it can be, misconstrued with like fortune telling and knowing the future, but I think part of that, and again, take my advice with a grain of salt, but I think part of that is just that you're an artist. You have a sense for symbolism, and uh, you can see beyond what's happening on the surface. And I think that's an important part of what we would consider the prophetic movement, right? Like the prophets, the modern day prophets that we have, and the civil rights movements and all that kind of stuff, is that they're not just directing the surface level of anything. They're seeing the ripples of how things affect the world. And they're just, I would say that part of having the gift of prophecy, whatever language we want to put it, it's just being super intuitive and being able to uh, see how interconnected people are and how certain things can affect that interconnectivity more than others. And one of those being injustice, probably the main one, because it's a denial of our interconnectivity. So I get it, the language. I would never call someone prophet, but I think when you boil it down, behind the language is that idea, that concept. Um, Janelle, but when they were like, it just means speaking truth to power, I was like, oh, I've been telling off oppressive authority since I was 7. Yeah, I mean that's right. I mean that's part of it for sure. Uh, and then Sarah, openness to mystery, I think is a great part of spirituality. I feel like dreams fall into that. Maybe I agree. I think if we have to be open to mystery. Um, and uh, I think that's definitely a part of it. And I think if we're open to mystery, we're just open in general, and we can hold things looser. It's almost practice for holding things loosely and being able to, go back to everything I learned from Bonnie about process theology. Like it's viewing and seeing that interconnectivity, and that being the base and the foundation for everything. And that may be a misrepresentation of process theology. So Bonnie, if you're listening, uh, feel free to hop on anytime and correct me. But yeah, Janelle, I think the white supremacy episode was the first time I'd actually heard Alan say he was a former Baptist. And I was like, yep, called that because I relate so much of his experience. I call my soul siblings, I call him my soul sibling for a reason. Our journeys have been very parallel. Yeah, um, Alan's a true intellect and a mystic, I would say. And he's able to be a product of his upbringing, but also transcend it in every way possible. and I don't know how he strikes that balance. I think that partly it's just because that's who he is, and he's uh yeah, it's pretty amazing. It is pretty amazing. But yeah, I think yeah, Alan's coming. It's interesting. All of us on the show, we come from very different evangelical backgrounds. You know, not to throw in a plug, but with Rajiv and Bonnie starting their own podcast from a Seventh Day Adventist perspective, I'm very excited about listening to it because I don't really have any gauge or realm outside of my conversations with them on what that world is like. So yeah, I'm very excited about delving into that world and just listening to them so that there's no opportunity for me to interrupt them or anything like that. So yeah. Janelle, when he said Awana, I was like, eek, triggered. Yeah. My first church experience was in a Baptist setting. And I did Awana for like a year, something like that. So I remember that. I had some family that's Baptist. My wife's family is Baptist. So, when she got married to me, there's that crazy Pentecostal kid down the road. Al and I also have a whole weird nature loving thing in common. Pretty sure he'd literally hug a tree too if he hasn't already. I don't want to speak for Alan, but you may be onto something, Janelle. Yeah. I think part of that too is Alan's, I think that there's a lot of that. People maybe that he lived in a very rural, unpopulated area, but that's just his nature. He's great. Yeah. I don't think it's a weird thing. Even though I do give Alan a hard time sometimes, but that's just more older brother stuff. But yeah. Yeah. All right. Wow. I think this might be the longest mic check yet. So Janelle, Lifeway, VBS, every theme was a racial or cultural stereotype. Yeah. There's a lot borrowed from that. My denomination, it wasn't Awana, it was Royal Rangers. And there's a lot of, I don't know, just a lot of stuff being appropriated. I embrace being weird, not an insult, 100%. I mean, if we're not weird, then what's the point? Get that. All right. Well, I'm going to sign off for this week's mic check. So I will be back again next week for sure. And then I think there's one more Sunday in July. And then everything else is kind of up in the air from there. I'm not sure what August is going to look like, but I will, excuse me, I'll give you an update next week. Other than that, don't forget to check out the show that's dropping this week on Tuesday, White Supremacy in Progressive Christianity. It's a fun episode. Fun episode. I guess that's not the best way to describe it. It's a good episode. It's a good conversation. So we hope you enjoy it. And spoiler, I don't know if you remember last time, but we did when we started our recordings for certain things a few weeks back, we had a playlist for our segment, and we're going to be bringing back the playlist segment. So we have a new playlist to share with you starting on Tuesday. So check that out. Janelle, well, have a wonderful time in the mountains next Sunday. That sounds like a great time. So you'll be with us in spirit for sure. So have a wonderful time. I hope that that's a refreshing time for you. And everyone else who's listening or have listened this week, we'll see you next week, and have a great rest of your day. Yeah, I haven't come up with a clever sign off for this thing, so maybe I will later. But see you all later. And thanks again for joining me. Take care.